I'm going to talk about an idea from On Palestine that interests me. This is by Chomsky and Pappé. I hope I'm pronouncing those both right. I am kind of new to the pro-Palestinian movement. I'm reading about Palestine. That's how I inform myself. And this book, released in the wake of Operation Protective Edge, which was in 2014, I was a child. Talks about it's a conversation. There's essays, but it's also a conversation between Chomsky and Pappé, where they talk about the past, present, and future. And one thing I think that's really interesting that they talk about is what protesters are doing and the effects of their protesting. There's a lot of discussion about this inside and outside of Israel. The inside of Israel aspect was something I really did not have any prior knowledge on, which was super interesting to learn about. Leon Pappé is Israeli. He was born in Haifa, I think. And Chomsky lived in Israel, I believe, for a decent period of time. And growing up was a Zionist. He talks about it in the book, in a more of a Jewish and Arab solidarity, like workers' movement kind of thing, which was the whole thing back in the 40s and the 30s. It was a different vibe then. That being said, so they talk about this in the internal Israeli movement. Now, there really isn't one, but I was really shocked to learn how ingrained in the society this kind of racist notion towards Palestinians is. There's a lot of really early indoctrination, and even with the internet, it's something definitely I see. Right, you see these young Jewish people going to Israel for these birthright trips, and I'm sure there's a lot of Israeli propaganda, and in general you see this the Israel-Palestine conflict, religion gets thrown into it a lot, right? Where it's this like Jewish determinate, like Jewish self-determination, and the whole aspect of this is their promise, this land, all this stuff. But I think it's really interesting to find out that it's not just that sentiment inside of Israel; it's also this sentiment that there's not really room for a movement that like there is outside. Now, protest protest outside of Israel, inside of Palestine, kind of. What I thought was really interesting was the way Chomsky specifically talks about, and I believe it's Chomsky, an academic boycott. So I believe a university or universities in Israel at the time were being boycotted by the American Scholars Association, the ASA. Or the academics, I don't know, something scholar association. ASA was what it was called. I remember that. And what I think is really interesting is he says that the debate, and now we can see this in the modern day, I'm going to get back to it in a second, but the debate is turned then from we're boycotting Israel to academic freedom and anti-Semitism, right? Academic freedom in this case. Later, he talks about divesting money from Israel, like Harvard divesting money or MIT divesting money, and then the talk becomes about anti-Semitism. And we saw that just recently, and it's crazy that this is still going on. These are still the conversations we're having in wake of the continued, regime of apartheid state, settler, colonial Israel, right? Like this is still a conversation we're even having. It's crazy to me. But I think it's interesting if you go back to the root idea of that, we're talking about what this kind of protest does. And I think it's really smart. He says, why don't we academically protest these American universities? Because one idea they constantly bring up is that Israel can become a pariah state. Israel can become, obsolete in any way, shape, or form besides and they can do whatever they want to Palestine as long as the U.S. is backing them, right? The whole time, as long as the U.S. is there backing them, that's what they have. And that comparison gets compared, or that situation gets compared to South Africa, which comes up a lot in the novel. Oh my gosh, I said that like 6 times. I've tried re-recording this video. I keep saying novel a lot of times in the conversation. So I think, it's really interesting. We have to, or what they're saying is that we have to kind of target our protests to make sure they are targeting the right thing. We don't want to target something that's wrong, right? If we're protesting Israel, maybe destroying weapons to the United States government isn't going to do the right thing because all that's doing is taking, these people who are making the weapons out of a job. This is just an example I'm giving. And B, it's not actually hurting Israel or the United States in any way, right? Something I find really interesting. And B, so we make sure we're targeting the right thing. We have to make sure that the root cause of the action is going to be perceived as what it's perceived as, right? If you attack Israel, it often, threats of anti-Semitism or claims of anti-Semitism hurled at you, right? And so making sure these Israeli protests, right? They talk a lot about the BDS, boycott, divest, sanction movement, which again, new to this, I'm not super aware of that program. I don't know if that's something that's even still around today. But, they say the effectivity of it is, so-so, the efficacy of it, so-so. But then he talks about boycotting products made in the Jordan Valley, right, which is an Israeli-occupied territory, right? They're occupying this territory that's not theirs. And I think that's really interesting because they're making settlements in it. Because then you could say, like, okay, that's a direct target, right? We're not buying this product from this portion of Israel because it is Israeli. It's going to affect the Israeli government. It's going to affect the Israeli economy, which is going to, in turn, hopefully help the I'm not going to even call it the Israel-Palestine conflict, help the Israeli occupation of Palestine, right? So yeah, that's something I've been thinking about, is how we protest things, how we target our protests, and how we make sure the right message gets across for the protesting. I think that's really interesting. And I think even in America, there can 1,000% be, in the modern day and age, something taken from that. It doesn't have to be like we're just protesting this awful apartheid state. It can be something as small as protesting, certain legislation, right? It can be like we have to make sure we're targeting the right thing. I think, there's a lot to be said in America about nonviolent protest and how we can utilize that correctly, right? It's very obvious that certain things, and I'm not going to get too deeply into this again because it's not something I thought about too much, but things like the No Kings protest, right? We have these mass mobilizations of people against the president, right? Mehdi Hassan, I don't remember exactly, I didn't listen to his King's Day speech, but in a podcast, he said, he was talking about a speech, he said, there are more of us than there are of them. And that's 1,000% true. But it doesn't matter unless there's solidarity and unless there is a target and unless there is a way that we make sure we hit the target and it's perceived as how we want it to be perceived. Because if not, protest, organization, all of this means absolutely nothing if there's not a poignant point and a target and a set goal. And we're targeting the right thing. We're not targeting A when we want to actually be, or we're not targeting B when we want to be talking about A, right? Because we think B and A are connected. No, we should target A. We need to target A, and we need to target it in a way that helps, in a way that actually, creates change. In America, that is more often than not nonviolent protesting, but it's the way that you do it, and it's the way that it is set on a course that needs to be corrected, and I think needs to be changed and maybe helped in American politics. Anyways, that was just something I was thinking about while reading this. I actually haven't even finished this book. I still have like 2 essays left. It's been really good though. I think next I'm going to try another one from Pappé. Maybe he has a book called A Very Short History of Palestine, or the Israel-Palestine conflict. And he also has Ethnic Cleansing in Palestine, I believe. The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, which is his most famous book. So I'm going to try out one of those. Anyways, I just like talking about books. I read a lot. And sometimes when I finish a book, actually most of the time, I will just look up the book's title on YouTube and maybe see if anyone was talking about it. And so I'm hoping that maybe 1 or 2 people will read this and see that. So anyways, thank you guys. Hope you enjoyed. Comment if you have any opinions on this and want to chat about it. Thank you.